Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman, and I am thrilled to have the privilege of speaking at the end of Codeland. It's a joy to do this conference in person. I hope that you get a chance in the future to do this in person, wherever the next one will be held. And I'll tell you that it's super fun to do it virtually from the comfort of my own home. I wish I could see you all, but I'm super happy that you're here with me today. And I want to just give a shout out to all of our wonderful speakers all day long that have given so much inspiration to us all, and also inspiration to me. I've been actually adding to this talk and taking notes and thinking about this talk as I've watched all of our great speakers throughout the entire day. So I want to talk to you about the art of computers. And I apologize for my Comic Sans. Apparently that's not a good font for your starting first slide. So I'm going to make that a little prettier. I work in open source, and I've worked in open source for many years, but it's not really an attractive slide. Let's give it a little pizzazz. Put on TikTok influencer, you can cash me. But I've been doing computers for a very long time, 30 plus years. And what I'm excited about is that you're here, whether you're early in career or later in career, whether you're at what they call a junior developer or senior developer, those aren't interesting labels at all. What I'm excited about is that you're here and you're excited about your coding journey, whether you're at the beginning, middle, or end of it. And I really hope that tech and all of us in the Dev2, the Codeland, and the Code Newbies community has welcomed you warmly. I really like this magazine cover from 1984 with the young lady doing her coding on a TI-99. This is a really wonderful time in tech when that was a regular, normal thing to see on the cover of a magazine, and I hope we're there once again. So I did this talk. I called it The Art of Computers because I wanted to ask some questions about what is the trick? What's the trick that I can tell someone about computers? Is this an art or is this a science? And well, there are some tricks. There's no one trick. I'll answer that question if it's an art or a science in a little bit, but I do have some tricks and some techniques that have worked for me over the years and some stories to tell. So here's what we're going to start with. I've got 4 things to share. Problem solving. Oh, wow, I called it program solving. Look at that. My first typo live on the Codeland. It's actually problem solving. Oh, I'm awful. That means I typed the word program way too much. Layering. We'll talk about a thing called composition, and then patterns and why it matters. And actually, that is bothering me so much that I'm now going to fix it because I'm going to do a live in production fix. Look at that. See? And no one noticed. So first thing to remember, problem solving. Now, what does that really mean? Oh, hey, I'm good at problem solving. We put those things on our resumes and our CVs. Problem solving is just simply asking yes/no questions at scale, asking the right questions. Sometimes you'll find yourself wondering why your coworker or that other person at work is just so good at Googling for stuff. It seems like it's a magical power that they have. Like, you've been Googling all afternoon, and then you tell them the problem, and they think for a while, and they Google it, and they found the answer. How can they do it? And you can't. It's that they are asking the right yes/no questions, and that their systems thinking may be perhaps more mature than yours, but we can teach these things. Let's say you want some toast. My toaster's broken. I use this example when I teach kids how to code, and I say, hey, everybody, welcome. We're going to learn how to code. My toaster's broken. Well, the simple way to fix it is pretty straightforward, right? What do? You buy a new toaster. That's simple thinking, and that's not being judgmental, but it is the simplest possible thing to do. But someone who's a systems thinker, a real debugger, someone who is excited about what's going on, well, wait a second, hang on, how can I think about this toast as a system? I asked this to a bunch of 14-year-old girls at a recent event, and I said, what's going on? And I knew that this was a room full of programmers because they started asking me amazing questions. Well, is the power on? Okay, well, how would I check that? How would I know if the power is on for my toaster? Well, could you plug something else in? One of the young people said, hey, did you blow a fuse? My parents say that there's a fuse in the garage. I should go check that. Someone else said, does the house even have power at all? And then one little kid yelled out, "Do the neighbors have power?" I love that. Then it got to get a little weird because someone actually wanted to know if there was an EMP, if someone had fired off an electromagnetic pulse and there were aliens invading the world, and that's why I couldn't have toast. And it became like a whole thing. But actually, those are the kinds of easy yes, no questions that can help me decide whether or not I can get some toast. So you got to ask yourself, are you at the stage where you're Googling a lot? That's okay. We all are at that stage. And even now, with all these years of programming, I Google a lot, but I Google more strategically. I Google more surgically. I've got a list in my head of the things that I can ask about my system when my system is not working. And when I ask those questions, I can eliminate not just a problem, but a whole class of problem, a whole style of problem. And the great thing about this is just a muscle. This is a muscle that you'll develop as you learn these different things. And we'll talk about how you can grow this muscle a little later in the talk here. And we like to joke, it's always DNS, the domain name services. Whatever's wrong with whatever you're doing, Abraham Lincoln said it right, it's always DNS. It's probably something there. I made a whole list here. You could take a screenshot if you like. These are some great things to check when you have a problem and you're trying to debug a thing. Check the logs. Did it work before? Is there a file locked? Are my IP addresses correct? My son said to tell you that it's never twins. Whatever it is, if there was a murder and there were two people, whatever it was, it's not twins. So you can probably remove that as a possible thing. Literally reading the error. It sounds really funny. Have you ever had a situation where you've been debugging a problem, you've been pounding your head for an hour, and you ask a friend, and they say, "Oh, it's that," and they point to the error message because you looked at everything but the error. We all make those mistakes, but if you ask those questions, you can really build your problem-solving muscle. And the great thing about it is that once you do that, you fail and you fail and you fail. It gives you this pile of fail that you can actually call from, you can use, you can pull from. What I've got that you don't have is 30 years of failing. Now, what we need to do in the Code Newbies community and in companies and the places where you work and the places that you're going to work is we need to make a comfortable and an inclusive environment where you feel that you can fail. If you feel that you can't, if you don't have the privilege to fail, if you worry that failing is how you're going to get fired and they're going to know you're a phony, then we need to work on that and make that something that is a focus in the culture of our community, our online community, our Dev2 community, and a focus on the community of the company that you're working for or that you're going to work for, making sure that you can have the privilege to fail as much as everyone else does, because you learn more from failing fast. So you can develop that problem-solving ability. That typo for program solving is going to haunt me for the end of my days. Just want to let you know that I feel sad about that. Another one is layering. Okay, layering is a really interesting thing. Layering is vertical, is organizing your programs and your projects and your code vertically. It's hiding complexity from yourself and from others. My friend Rob Connery said it best: layering, it's actually lying. It's lying. You're lying selectively to yourself. And if you write a really great function that hides some complexity, it does all these amazing things, you name that method, do it, and every time you call it, it does it, and that's awesome, and all the complexity is hidden, you did a good job with your layering right there. There's a lot of really great examples of layering that just work. Things just work, and we get to experience them as users. I think this is a really interesting one. You all are probably making web apps or you're making mobile apps, and you get to think about pressing F12 in your developer tools. And maybe you've looked at HTTP headers and you've seen what's going on behind the scenes with web apps. Maybe you look at a GET in HTTP or a form post and you go, hey, cool, I looked behind the scenes. But you don't really think about sending an email, right? You've all sent email. You go into your email, your Gmail, or your Outlook. You put in the file and you say send. But have you ever flipped that around and looked behind it? Well, this is what an email looks like. That is literally email. You've got name value pairs, date, colon, subject, colon. But look at line 10, content type. Where have I seen content type before? I've seen that when I've done web stuff. I've seen that in HTTP headers. And then I see this boundary with a funny number. And then that boundary shows up multiple times. And you can see that we have on line 14, the plain text. And then we've got on line 19, the HTML text. I started digging into this and I found out that you can actually send a multi-part email with a section that's just for if you view the email on an Apple Watch. I had no idea. But I thought when I was digging into this that I was learning all about email, but what I was really learning about was the pieces that make up the internet itself. These are the pieces like MIME, these are multimedia internet extensions. Look really closely right there. That's an email. I'm going to go to the next slide. That's posting an HTML form. Isn't that interesting? Look at that multi-part form data. This is when you hit post and you send some form data. You might send or upload a file. Isn't it interesting? Let me back up. Email, form post. You know this stuff already. Maybe you already know it. What's happening is you've seen a Lego brick that was a layer that was hidden from you. And then you saw another one. You said, wait a second, these are the same brick. You know about IP addresses, or you're learning about them. You know about ports. You know that HTML is text that uses HTTP to go over port 80. Email's the same. It uses similar bricks. It goes over a different port using a different protocol. But if you look at that, if you could hit F12 tools on email, you'd see the same thing. All these great ideas that we build on top of, that we sit on top of, all these layers that lie to us, that make the internet usable, have grown out of other ideas. I'll give you a really extreme example of that, of reusing a great idea. That Victorinox record player there is over 130 years old. That hard drive is brand new, and I put it in my computer a couple of weeks ago. Those are the same. The idea of data encoded on a spinning disk with a head that moves and seeks inward and outward revolutions per minute, it's the same. That's really empowering. To know that is really comforting. What I want you to do as you're exploring your tech journey is think about, have I seen that before? Is that a play? Could that have been plugged in this way? Is that a new idea? Or is that just a new way to do an old idea? That's really interesting. And what's also cool about this is that they didn't teach any of this in school. This is just one of those things that you pick up. And I encourage you to explore, to Wikipedia, to talk to your friends, to get excited about these things, because it's these things that we're sitting on top of, which makes computers and coding and the internet so fun. We talked a little bit about problem solving. We talked a little bit about layering. Let's talk about composition, about modeling data, plugging things in once we've got those Lego pieces. And composition is a fancy word that they use often in school to just express a has-a relationship. If I have this, it also has that. If you have a file system, you have a file system driver, and the file system driver has a, and it is this group of composed things. So I'm going to tell you a story. This really happened. All of this is real. So there's this show on Netflix. It's called Altered Carbon. And one of the greatest characters on the show is named Poe. And Poe is an AI who is actually in the form of a hotel. He's actually Edgar Allan Poe. And he is an embodiment of the hotel. And he is a hologram of sorts, but he can also make himself together with nanomolecules. And I just think he's the greatest thing. He's the cat's pajamas, okay? So I tweet him on Twitter, and he's a lovely, lovely fellow, Chris Connor, very talented actor. You can read about him on IMDb. And it turns out he lives in my town. So I shoot my shot and I say, let's hang out. We'll do a podcast. And we go and we hang out and I meet him and he's charming and lovely. And we go to Chipotle and we have tacos and I've got this amazing bromance with this fantastic, cool dude. And he's like, yeah, we'll get the wives together. We'll hang out. Just charming and awesome and a great show. We recorded a podcast and it was the greatest thing ever. So I said, shake his hand, take off. And I come back to my house and I plug in my SD card and I go to drive G, where my SD card usually has the WAV files for my podcast, because I'm really excited to get this show out to the world. And the files aren't there. There's nothing. You can look on the left there in that tree. It's actually this infinite loop of root directories that point back to themselves. I'm actually like I can feel it in my chest. You have to understand what this feels like. Like you know what this feels like. You've lost data. It's a sickening, overwhelming, disgusting, horrible feeling. Where are the files? Not to mention that the bromance is over. He's never going to hang out with me again. He's not going to, like, why you just wasted this actor's time, and he was amazing. What am I going to do? But I go and I right click on the file on the disk, the USB disk, the SD card, and I right click on it, and it says used space, 300 megs. I'm like, used space, is it there? Like, maybe it used up some space. That's 300 megs. That's about a half an hour of two people talking. That's cool. At this point, I'm wondering what I can do, but I'm not a low-level programmer. I don't write this code anymore. What do? Do I Google for an undelete application? I looked around. I couldn't figure out anyone. I didn't want to pay $40, but I was overwhelmed. I'm like about to cry. I can feel it in my eyes. And then I remembered what's being hidden from me. It's all lies. It's layers and layers of lies. These are bytes. There's 345 million bytes. I know what a byte is. You know what a byte is. Like, it's a byte, and then it's a string, and then it's a lot of strings. It's an array. There's a giant array of 345 million bytes there, and darn it, my freaking files are in there. So I start digging, and I go layer and layer and layer and layer, and I find out that the file address table is corrupted and it's zeroed out. And I dig into this, and I go into a hex editor, and it's a whole thing. And I learn and I learn, and I take notes, and I learn, and I see that this value should be that value. And I make a copy of the disk, and I have this giant array, and I edit some stuff, and I get my WAV files back. Now, this doesn't make me like elite hacker. It doesn't make me an expert. It doesn't make me anything other than the person that remembered that there were bytes, and they were there. It was just that the table of contents on my disk was missing, and I got the files back. I remembered that there were layers, and I also reminded myself, even after all these years, that nothing in the computer is hidden from you. You can just say, get out of the way. I want to see the process. I want to see the threads. I want to see the file system. There are tools. We saw some of those tools in the security talk, open source, some not, that'll let you seeing what's going on in your computer. And you just have to decide how far you want to dig. Now, the fun part about this, as we saw in Lucky's talk, is you don't have to do these things. You could be a T-shaped developer. Just be a broad developer. Think about things at the highest level. And when something goes wrong, that's cool. You don't have to worry about it. But sometimes it's nice to know you can dig. The pieces are composed and layered in such a way that you have the power to dig if you want to. You can drive a stick shift if you really needed to, even though you usually Uber or take the bus. And that's empowering, and that's super fun. And I want to help you do that. And I know that other people in tech want to make you feel that powerful as well. So there's problem solving, there's thinking about layering, there's thinking about how pieces are composed together. And here's another thing that I think you're going to find in your journey, and that I have found. The older I get, what am I good at is pattern recognition. Sometimes it's just a matter of, hang on, I've seen that before. That doesn't mean that I have a text file with all the links of all the history of all the things that I've ever looked for. It's simply the fact that I've seen that before. What was that thing? I recognize that. If you're good at pattern recognition, you can go, what was that? Oh yeah, I remember 4 years ago, Interesting things will happen. You'll notice that a lot of these stories are about me pounding my head against the wall for 10 hours, 8 hours, 13 hours. This one here happens to be 13 hours. I was trying to get an application to run on a Raspberry Pi. I've got this fun Raspberry Pi, and I was running I would run the app on my local machine. It worked great. I copied it to the Raspberry Pi, and it didn't work. And I just spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure it out. And I eventually decided, well, hang on, I'm going to compare what's on the Raspberry Pi with what's on my computer. And I want you to look real close here. What's going on here? 0D, those red things are missing here, here, and here. Now keep in mind, I still don't know what I'm doing. I just did that binary search, that problem solving. Hang on, am I writing to the right file? Am I looking at this file? Is this the file? But here's where being old and having done tech for a long time got me thinking. I said, 0D, what's 0D? I've seen that somewhere before. What is 0D? Well, I was using an FTP program, file transfer protocol, to drag and drop my little program from my Windows machine over to my Raspberry Pi. And there's an option. There's an option that says treat files without an extension as ASCII. American Standard for Computing, blah, 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 interchange. ASCII is what we do when we type text files. It was treating my binary, my program, my little app as a binary file. And I thought to myself, 0D, that's hex for 13, and that's a CR. You've heard CRLF. Sometimes we just say that. I'm using Git. Hey, look, CRLF. Oh, make sure. Are you using CR or LF? Are you on a Mac? Are you on Windows? You don't think about those, but what's CR? Carriage return. What's line feed? Line feed. Look at that, LF, line feed. CR and LF, 13 and 10, or D and A, are codes to tell a typewriter to carriage return, line feed. Again, 120 years old plus, used all throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even now, to control typewriters, to control your printer. And what was happening was the text file processor buried deep in this program was treating my little binary application, my little program, as a text file. And it said, oh, I'll strip out that. You don't want that, that carriage return? Of course not. I'm doing that as a convenient help for you. And the only reason that I know it is that I saw it before. And here's the great part. It'll never happen again. I'm going to remember that until I freaking die. And I hope that you have a million stories like that. Don't look at these things as a waste of time. They're a gift. That 13 hours, I learned a ton. And now I have that in my head. And now I can tell you, and you'll always make sure that you transfer your files with binary because you'll remember. So problem solving, layering or lying, composing or composition of different applications together, and then watching for patterns. So now that I know these things, what kind of fun, amazing things can I make? Can you make? Can we make with this knowledge? Well, here's just one thing that I get to work on and I've assembled, and I'm part of an amazing open source community who has done these things. They've done layering, composition. I have to do problem solving on a regular basis, and I have to think about patterns. So I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have a number of implants, insulin pump, and I use what's called an open source artificial pancreas. There's pieces here where it actually pumps insulin into me. It's implanted in my stomach. I've also got a Bluetooth device that's down here that sips blood and looks at my blood sugar. And we capture that information. We grab it over Bluetooth with a phone and we upload it up into the database using REST APIs, using HTTP. We store it in MongoDB. And then we turn it into a REST API. There's a URL for my body that tells you my blood sugar. So I'm doing all these layers to hide all the needles and the tubes and the stuff that keeps me vertical. Why? Well, for no other reason than because I want my blood sugar and a Git branch in my prompt. You look on the left-hand side there where it says Scott at Ironheart, that 110 with the down arrow, that's my blood sugar. My buddy Nate came up with a way to have a process that runs in the background that grabs from the API, stores it in a file, and then we stick it, in this case, in PowerShell or Bash alongside my Git prompt.